The churning waters of the Ohio River serve as an appropriate symbol for the fierce rivalry in the NFL's most competitive division, the AFC Central. Last week, Cincinnati's Riverfront Stadium was the site where the frisky first-place Bengals tried to ward off the challenge of the surprising Cleveland Browns, merely a single game behind. The Bengals were wary of not only arch-rival Cleveland, but also Houston and Pittsburgh, both much in the race for division honors. The Cincinnati defense ranks first in the American Conference, but last week they had their hands full as Cleveland unleashed a tiger of its own. Irrepressible Greg Pruitt, running on an extremely sore sprained ankle, raced for 124 yards. Pruitt has been doubly dangerous this season because Cleveland has been using him on short passes and screens to exploit his speed. But against Cincinnati, even perfectly executed screens like this one failed to spring Pruitt loose because of great play by the Bengal linebackers. Reggie Williams stripped Pruitt's interference and allowed number 55, Jim LeClaire, to knife in from the side and make the tackle. Cleveland had many chances to score, but could not capitalize. Twice, they drove to the Bengals 7 and 11, and each time were denied. Once on a 41-yard fumble by Pruitt and assorted other players. Despite the foibles of the bouncing ball, one thing always certain in a Browns-Bengals shootout is that Isaac Curtis will burn the Browns. His 69-yard touchdown pass from Ken Anderson was his 17th in 4 years against the Browns as the Bengals increased their lead over Cleveland and Houston to 2 full games. In Los Angeles, the Rams defense got them off to a rousing start against the Seattle Seahawks. Monty Jackson's 41-yard touchdown interception was the catalyst for a big 200 yards plus passing day for James Harris, back after missing 2 games with a shoulder injury. With the game ball tucked safely under his arm and bolstered by the knowledge that the 49ers had lost to the Cardinals, Harris relaxed and watched as Pat Hayden mopped up the expansion team by passing to Tom Gerdine for the Rams' 6th touchdown of the day. Los Angeles rolled up 45 points in its highest total of the season, but more importantly, with San Francisco's defeat, the Rams regained sole possession of first place in the NFC West. The New York Giants theme song was "What a Difference McVay Makes." As their new coach's loose and relaxed football should be fun philosophy was injected into practices all week long. But come Sunday, McVay didn't make any difference at all, as statue-like Craig Morton was sacked 6 times by the Philadelphia Eagles, possessor of one of the league's lesser defenses. The game's single touchdown was scored in the second quarter when Philadelphia's Mike Barilla passed 13 yards to Harold Carmichael. The only item of interest for Giant fans at the Meadowlands Stadium was the hard running of Doug Cotter, and one of the mysteries of the NFL season is why Bill Arnsparger and now John McVay continue to ignore New York's $6 million man. Larry Zonka was used mainly as a blocker for Cotter and carried the ball only 7 times all day. For the Eagles, it was a first shutout in 105 games and a 3rd victory of the season, 2 of them against the Giants. For New York, it was their first whitewash suffered since the days of Herbert Hoover and an 8th consecutive loss. Only John McKay's expansion Buccaneers can match the futility of John McVay's Giants, once the proud flagship team in the NFL. Some people in Tampa actually believe this, but last week Kansas City's conference-leading offense arrived equally well prepared. Kansas City's prolific attack turned in yet another outstanding performance as Mike Livingston passed the Chiefs into a 20-point fourth-period lead. Tampa Bay football fans have suffered through a most difficult first season, but neither their loyalty nor their enthusiasm has been dissipated. And Period 4 gave Buccaneer fans a tantalizing preview of better days ahead. Trailing by 20, Steve Spurrier directed his Florida Pirates to 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns, including this one to the coach's son, J.K. McKay. The fledgling Buccaneers rallied when they could have easily thrown in the towel. No, they're not number 1 yet, but they'll keep working on it. The Jets aren't number 1 yet either, but with new faces like number 14 Richard Todd and number 45 Louis Giamona, New York's football outlook improves a bit each week. Still, the Jets have scored fewer points than any team in football. So with their offense in transition, New York has discovered new avenues to the end zone. Last Sunday, for the second time this season, the Jets beat the Bills. But from here on in, for both teams, it's all uphill. Elsewhere in the AFC East, the Dolphins scored only a single touchdown against the tough young New England Patriots. But Bob Greasy's 16-yard hookup with tight end Jim Mandich proved quite enough. At the bottom of the screen, number 81, Russ Francis, knew he'd committed a no-no on this play, but quarterback Steve Grogan and wide receiver Marlon Briscoe didn't. Sadly for New England, Marlon's sideline scamper went for naught. A crushing offsides call wiped out Briscoe's game-tying play. Worse yet, it derailed New England's playoff express. In Pittsburgh, the playoff express has just left the terminal. Last week, Steeler fans held a grandstand prayer service, during which they asked the spirit of misfortune to intervene where necessary to preserve Pittsburgh's win streak. Ah, the powers work in curious ways. While somebody out there kept pulling cosmic strings, down here for the Chargers, the football had no handle. Bad luck and a tough opponent add up to a long Sunday afternoon. The frustrated Chargers forfeited one opportunity after another. It seemed whenever momentum went up for grabs, invariably a Steeler came down with it. Still, the Chargers trailed by a mere 3 points as Period 4 began. Time now for Pittsburgh to unveil the latest in ball control wizardry. On this ball control play, Pittsburgh controlled the ball for nearly a minute. But the world champs soon got serious, and points soon went up on the board. With Terry Bradshaw back in the lineup, Pittsburgh erupted for 20 fourth-quarter points and their second straight shutout victory. The almost forgotten Steelers now have evened their record at 4-4 and suddenly appear very much in contention for a playoff spot, though the odds of a third straight Super Bowl appearance seem very much against them. 3 weeks ago, Hank Stram's New Orleans Saints defeated the Atlanta Falcons 30-0. And last Sunday in Atlanta, it looked as though the Saints just might do it again. This easy touchdown by number 34, Tony Galbraith, was canceled by a penalty. But on the very next snap, quarterback Bobby Douglas faked the same play to Galbraith and then gave the ball to Henry Childs on the tight end reverse as New Orleans coasted to a 14-0 halftime lead. In the second half, number 16, Scott Hunter, took over for Atlanta and connected on 10 of 11 passes, 2 of them for touchdowns. The Falcons had been ranked last in the NFL in offense, but Hunter led them to 23 points in the second half and thereby participated in his first winning game in 3 years. For Bobby Douglas and the Saints, it was a painful reprisal because the fans always want to know who won this week, not 3 weeks ago. In Oakland, the Denver Broncos figured if they could control the ball long enough, they had a good chance to beat the Raiders. And up to a point, they were right, because after 3 quarters, the game was tied at 6. But the Broncos' big play man has been number 80, Rick Upchurch, and the Raiders never let him get too far out of hand. Denver never did score a touchdown, partly because number 10, Steve Ramsey, spent a good part of the afternoon on his back. In fact, Oakland's blitzing defenses accounted for the staggering total of 10 sacks, and at times, it seemed pointless for Ramsey to even try to get up. Not surprisingly, the big play for Oakland was delivered by Ken Stabler to a 12-year wide receiver named Fred Biletnikoff. It was Stabler's 15th touchdown pass of the season, and finally put the Raiders ahead of their opponents in points scored for the season. But somehow, Oakland is tied with Baltimore and Dallas for the league's best record. And doesn't that set up interesting playoff speculation? 2 more contenders played one of the season's strangest games last Sunday in St. Louis. The 49ers goof gave the Cardinals the ball inside the 10, and as San Francisco coach Monty Clark said later, that was the game right there. J.V. Kane's score gave St. Louis the lead after just 1.5 minutes of play. But the 49ers' league-leading defense allowed no more Cardinal scoring in the first half. Meanwhile, Jim Plunkett was handing off to Delvin Williams, number 24, and Williams ran wild. Del Williams rushed for 194 yards and the 2 touchdowns, which put the 49ers ahead at the half, 13-7. In the second half, the NFL's best pass protectors gave Jim Hart the time he needed. Terry Metcalf's score had the Cardinals ahead again, 14-13 after 3 quarters. But on the very next series, Jim Plunkett and the 49ers came right back. Newly acquired Jim Lash, number 87, made the big play. But then Jim Hart and Mel Gray made an even bigger play. Mel Gray's 77-yarder meant sudden death overtime, which belonged exclusively to the Cardinals' sometime forgotten fullback, Jim Otis. Otis carried on 10 of the 11 offensive plays run in the overtime period, thereby setting up the game winner by Jim Bakken. For the Cardinals, who had lost in Washington 6 nights earlier, It was an important victory because it put them one game ahead of the Redskins and just one game behind the Cowboys in the torrid NFC East. These days, NFL officials appear to be outthrowing the game's glamour men, the quarterbacks, resulting in a trend which last week again disgusted more than one interested observer and turned forward progress into disheartening retreat. At the heart of the problem, angry players see their skills being challenged by the repetitious infractions, prompting one such individual to take matters into his own hands. Detroit's Charlie Sanders solution was really very simple. Penalize the officials for penalizing the players. A thought, though well received by coaches and players alike, generally found to be unacceptable by members of the officiating squad, who saw little humor in it. On this Sunday, however, possibly the biggest crime didn't even draw a flag, as the Detroit Lion defense vandalized the Green Bay Packer offense by stealing 2 Lynn Dickey passes, forcing 4 fumbles, and leaving them without a touchdown. The Lions' mastery on defense was matched by their offense, which sailed on lengthy Greg Landry completions to a convincing 27-6 win. Offense combined with defense to produce Detroit's blueprint for victory, and it was a similar plan which enabled Dallas to construct a triumph over arch-rival Washington. Showing little effect of a broken finger on his right hand, Roger Staubach chose to build the Cowboy attack around a stream of medium passes to backs like Preston Pearson, number 26. These completions, coupled with a steady grind-'em-out ground game, moved the Cowboys in for 2 short scores and secured for Dallas first place in the NFC East. Though seldom in it, Washington did manage 1 score on a Joe Theismann to Roy Jefferson connection. Most of this Halloween night, however, Redskin quarterbacks found doomsday more frightening than a jack-o'-lantern, as the Dallas defenders tricked them into retreat, then treated them to some bruises. Dallas claimed victory 20-7 by placing a swift and sudden halt to Redskin passers and runners alike, in effect, by stopping the entire team. But in Chicago, the Bears weren't as concerned about stopping the entire Viking attack, but rather sought to eliminate the one man who makes Minnesota's offense work. That one individual is the multi-talented Chuck Foreman, number 44. And with a purpose to their task, Chicago proved that if you can stop Foreman, the Vikings can be beaten. With the legs virtually removed from the Minnesota game plan, the Viking offense became a plodding hulk, fueled by Fran Tarkenton, who, though he managed to break the remaining all-time passing marks of John Unitas, failed to produce the necessary points to beat the Bears. Chicago's brilliance on defense was matched by Minnesota's Purple Gang defenders, who sent Bear quarterback Bob Avellini looking everywhere but the stands to search for an open receiver. Avellini should have saved his strength, for as his 12 yards passing proved, there were few openings through the air. But on the ground, Chicago found gaps good for 2 scores, one by number 34, Walter Payton, as the Bears eased past the Vikings 14-13. The NFC Central, once scoffed at for its lesser teams, suddenly has both the Bears and the Lions from which to draw credibility, as each pursue the Vikings in a race for a possible playoff slot.